Hello everyone and welcome back to Quantifiers. Today's passage that we'll be reading has a primarily domain of business and economics with some elements of pharmaceutical industry as a subtopic. We are talking about capitalism, we are talking about profit as a very important motive. Let us read the passage to gain further insights. Just a few years ago, type C hepatitis guaranteed a slow and certain death for many. Available treatments were effective in about half of the patients, and the side effects could be awful. Things changed when the drug Harvoni arrived in 2014. With cure rates approaching 99% and far fewer side effects, Harvoni's sales topped $13.8 billion in 2015. But then an odd thing happened. Sales began to drop precipitously. Harvoni, in conjunction with other four hepatitis C drugs, would generate only $4 billion in 2018. So basically, what are we talking about in this paragraph? In the beginning, we are talking about a particular drug which was assumed to be not even assumed, rather, it picked up in the sales as a very promising kind of a drug for hepatitis C, with the sales topping around $13.8 billion. And almost after 3 years, it dropped down to $4 billion. According to the analyst as Goldman Sachs, the principal reason was the drug erodes its own market. Let us understand this further. In a memo leaked to news outlets in 2019, the Goldman Sachs analyst cautioned against investing in pharmaceutical or biotechnology companies aiming to develop outright cures and cite Harvoni as a case study. It is a simple point to me. If profit is your goal, then a drug that eradicates a disease and thereby kills its own demand is not a wise investment. So we have been told that when in 2005 this drug was administered, around 99% cure rates were there. People had very few side effects. That is what Goldman Sachs is trying to say, that your purpose should not be to cure if you are into the pharmaceutical industry, because if you cure your goal, that is, if you cure the disease, then obviously you're killing the own demand, and it is not a very wise investment. Since the overwhelming majority of pharmaceutical development occurs in the free market economies, where privately owned firms act as a force, major driving progress, and the profit motive is what moves private firms, isn't it but natural that the principles of capitalism, which have increased efficiency and thereby spread prosperity to a previously unimaginable proportion of masses in many countries, oppose progress in pharmaceutical sector beyond a certain point? Should we be surprised that the more unabashed the faith in capitalism is in a country, the more expensive healthcare is in that country? So he's asking us a couple of rhetorical questions as to how capitalism actually brings up the costs of healthcare in a particular country. But there's a deeper set of issues surrounding how capitalism distorts the very bedrock of medicine. In a system driven primarily by profit, the development of certain treatments may languish. They may become slow because they won't sell for much. That is the reason why more research is dedicated to how hair can be regrown on the bald head of rich Americans or Europeans than how poor Africans or Asians can be cured of a dangerous infection. So see how even the pharmaceutical companies are basically, the author is trying to propagate, interested in making a lot of profit. And their targets are simply people who are going to pay an exorbitant price for even a menial treatment like regrowing the hair. In an episode of the popular fictional television series Quincy, aired on March 4th, 1981, Jack Klugman played a gritty Los Angeles medical examiner, investigating the suicide of a boy with Tourette syndrome, a neurological disease which causes uncontrollable tics and verbal outbursts. The show featured congressional hearings meant to investigate why no drugs were available to treat the disease. So basically, we are given some sort of a hypothetical question or hypothetical situation, not a question, sorry, in which we are told about how a particular person from Los Angeles medical examiner is trying to examine a particular guy who died by suicide, and the cause was the Tourette syndrome, and why, as such, there was no drugs that were made to treat the disease. In those hearings, fictional representatives from the pharmaceutical industry explained why that many diseases, including Tourette's, were thought to be so rare that there were no financial incentive to develop medication. So basically, we are talking about in the paragraph that if you have some sort of a finance, or probably a financial incentive, then only developing a medicine is something that would be very, very feasible in the pharmaceutical industry. The episode struck a national chord through the US, and Klugman was invited to testify before a rare congressional panel to investigate the same issue: non-existent treatment for rare or orphan diseases. The New York Times featured Klugman's testimony. Public opinion rallied, and the Congress passed the orphan drug in 1982. The bill introduced large subsidies for development costs, accelerated regulatory approval, and 7 years of monopoly for development of orphan drugs within the US. The bill paid off. So ultimately, US decided to probably work on the orphan drugs, that is, creating drugs for diseases that are very, very rare. The family of orphan drugs enlarged by more than 40 times. However, the grant of even a limited monopoly to orphan drug developers has allowed these drugs to be priced insanely high. As a result, the US pharmaceutical companies now somewhat neglect developing better treatments for more common maladies, that is, deadly diseases, because they know if they're producing an insanely high or an exorbitant price for a drug, which is for a disease that is extremely rare, so they are obviously covering up on the cost that they could cover from the other people, right? So that is what the whole of the passage is about. A very interesting theme has been put forward by the author, that when the industry feels that there is no financial incentive, they probably do not want to work towards that particular goal, and even the companies do not want to invest more money. Now let us look at the primary purpose of the passage. The primary purpose of the passage is to argue that, very simple, we've discussed it so many times over a course of time throughout the passage, unchecked capitalism and profit motive towards harming societies. We are not talking about harming society. We are talking about developing a drug. Yes, if there is no drug that we develop, ultimately harm is going to be there in the society, but this is not something that the author is specifically talking about. We should not let principles of free market economics shape how pharmaceutical industry operates. Free market economics was just a minor point stated by the author. It wasn't the major argument of the passage. The principles of capitalism and profit motive distort the development of medicine in ways that don't always provide the greatest benefit to people. They do provide a benefit, but that's for a limited period of time, and it is not one of the greatest. So you are providing them with medicine, but that is so overpriced, you are drawing the cost from it, and ultimately the other maladies are not being taken care of. Drug makers should be brought under greater public oversight if we want them to work for the benefit of both their shareholders and the customers at once. ऐसा कोई भी बात author ने पूरे passage में नहीं किया कि उनको public oversight मिला हो. So the correct answer for this question would be option number C. Coming to question number 2. In a memo leaked to the news outlets, the Goldman Sachs analyst cautioned against investing in pharmaceutical or biotechnology companies, aiming to develop outright cures. इसका हमारे को एक बहुत क्लियर कट एग्जाम्पल दे रखा था. इसका एग्जाम्पल ये दे रखा था कि जो हमारा एनालिस्ट है उसने किस चीज में इस चीज को बोला. उसने ये चीज बोला था कि यहाँ पे दे रखा था, somewhere it was given here, ये जो उन्होंने and cite Harvoni as a case study. उन्होंने क्या बोला था कि हार्वनी जो है उसने 99% जो है अपनी एफिकेसी दिखाई एज अ ड्रग. तो आप जो चीज बनाना चाह रहे हो, जिस चीज को क्योर करना चाह रहे हो, जिससे आपका जनरेशन ऑफ इनकम है, आप उसी चीज को एज अ कॉज जो है मार. So option number A बोलता है global changes in ways people live and commingle will lead to the emergence of many new health concerns. We are not talking about the living and commingling. Goldman Sachs has not made any reference to this. Many known pathogens frequently evolve into drug-resistant variants. We are again not talking about drug resistance. We are talking about the fact कि जो आप क्योर निकाल रहे हो, राइट, आप जो क्लेम कर रहे हो आउटराइट क्योर निकालने का, या आप जो आउटराइट क्योर निकाल रहे हो, आप अपना ही नुकसान कर रहे हो, क्योंकि अगर बीमारी ही नहीं रहेगी तो पैसा कहाँ से बताओ? अपने ही डिमांड को मारना इज नॉट अ वाइज इन्वेस्टमेंट. Though relatively small, there are examples of infectious diseases that led to extinction of large host population. We are again not talking about any extinction of population. So the correct answer is option number 4. It is impossible to predict whether a drug produced through research will be outright cure, a partial cure, or a failure. And why? Because here he's trying to say in a memo leaked to the news outlets, Goldman Sachs analysts caution against investing in pharmaceutical biotechnology aiming to develop outright cures. क्योंकि आप बिगिनिंग में बोल ही नहीं सकते कि आपकी दवाई जो है आउटराइट क्योर करेगी, पार्शियल क्योर करेगी, कैसा क्योर करेगी. ठीक. It can be inferred from the passage the Tourette syndrome. So we are talking about this particular disease causes problem for children's physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Right? Seems to be a very, very plausible answer choice. Nevertheless, we should read further. Was a rare incurable condition that affected children. Since it comes under the category of the orphan drugs and orphan diseases, option number B makes a lot of sense. Yes, this could have been the side effect of this disease, that probably the child committed suicide because it may have had certain implications. It is a fictional disease for which medical science has no incentive to develop. We are not talking about fictional disease, it was a rare disease. It had been as much an orphan disease in 1981 as type C was in 2013. It was an orphan disease, not just one like that. According to the passage, the Orphan Drug Act of 1982 did not make it बोलता है viable for drug manufacturers to develop cures for rare diseases. In fact, इसने बोला था कि निकाली. Possible for people suffering from rare disease to get treatment, हो सकता है. Affordable for, अच्छा did not बोला, sorry. Affordable for everyone suffering from rare disease. This is going to be the answer. क्योंकि possible for people getting the real treatment ये बनाया ही इसीलिए गया था. अफोर्डेबल नहीं था बिकॉज यहाँ पे क्लियरली ये बताया कि इंसेनली हाई प्राइसेस पे जो है इसके मेडिसिन बिक रही थी. लेस इंक्रीजिंगली फॉर ड्रग मैन्युफैक्चरर्स टू डेवलप क्योर्स फॉर कॉमन डिजीजेस. ये भी दे रखा है. क्यों? क्योंकि मेरे को ज्यादा पैसा जो है ऑप्शन नंबर सी जहाँ पे रियल ट्रीटमेंट में दे रही है फॉर रेयर डिजीज टू उससे मिल रहा है. तो करेक्ट आंसर फॉर फोर्थ क्वेश्चन विल बी ऑप्शन नंबर सी. According to the passage, the actor Jack Klugman was. Who was he? He was an actor, as the question also states. A medical examiner. He's not a medical examiner. He was someone who was very instrumental. अगर हमने last paragraph में देखा है, Klugman के बारे में क्या बताया? That he was very, very instrumental in bringing forward this particular case. And उसने public opinion gather किया, कांग्रेस में बिल पास करवाया orphan drugs in 1982. A celebrity suffering, he wasn't suffering himself. Tasked with finding why there was no medicine. He was not tasked with finding why there was no medicine. That was just one aspect of it. We have been told about the major role that guy had played. So he was a key player in the orphan drug becoming a law. After finding out this whole thing, after investigating, right? He was the one who became the face of it and advocated for the orphan drugs in the US. So the correct answer for question number 5 is option number 8. So this passage was pretty much easy to understand. First, because it is coming from the field of management and business, and second, it has a very deeper kind of a concept to portray. So I'll see you in the next session with another interesting reading comprehension. Thank you.